Conversations with Azu Ishekwele.
This is Conversation with Azu, our weekly diary on life and politics. And stay tuned as we bring you an interesting episode. Do journalists pass the buck? Are they open to accountability and hold themselves to the same high standards they demand and expect from the government in particular, or society in general? The answer may not be an absolute yes or an absolute no. Such a debate is very consequential and long overdue. It popped up during the Nigerian Guild of Editors annual conference held on the 12th and 13th of November at the NAF Conference Center in Abuja. Keynote speaker at the event, Governor Hope Uzodimma of Imo State, sidestepped the topic of his address and chose instead to remind all editors gathered in one place of the biblical proverb, "Physician, heal thyself," using different words. Once again, welcome to Conversation with Azu, and our topic today is titled Editors and the Missing Part of Uzodimma's Trust Story. You're welcome, Azu.
Thanks for having me once again, Julius. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. If you ask me, Governor Uzodimma came to the conference prepared to swap the ball. Did he succeed?
Oh, yes, he did to a very large extent. As you said in your intro, well, first let me dial back a bit. I have always had, it's always been under some sort of cloud of controversy as far as I'm concerned. Some of it, I think, for good reason, others not for so good reasons. So I was not so sure the choice of Governor Hope Uzodimma as a keynote speaker was a good one, but there you had it. And his keynote was good. The delivery was even better.
Wow.
But yes. But then, obviously, after he finished, the topic for this year's editors' conference was electoral integrity, and then also the role that the role of the country's role as we prepare for 2027, and our role as a nation, and obviously as a media towards. But he actually then repurposed the topic, as you have said, and then put it squarely that editors cannot be holding others accountable and then try to escape accountability, which was very, very smart.
All right. As a fellow of the Guild of Editors, it's not the first time you would come across opinions or assertions that journalists need to take their share in the blame for the failure of governance. Is this a fair demand?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think it's an appropriate conversation, which, it's really an appropriate conversation because especially there's been no time that society has needed journalism more than the current season and time in which we find ourselves, when there's such a proliferation of misinformation, malinformation, and what is generally called fake news. And it's under this kind of climate that journalism distinguishes itself from other forms of communication. And what makes journalism different from other forms of communication, essentially, and a number of factors: the integrity that the profession or the craft is associated with, the fact that we also verify, and that we are fair, we are balanced, we are ethical. And also, more importantly, the fact that we also provide context and meaning for what is happening. There's such flux in society today, so much flux, and people are wondering what is happening, what is true, what is not true. That is when you need journalism to step in and make a difference. And those of us who are actually in the craft have a much higher responsibility than the rest of the population to help citizens understand and provide meaning and context. But then we also have to understand it first. And so my straightforward answer to your question is that we also need to hold ourselves to the standards, yes, to the very high standards, and
all right,
which we hold others.
You stated that Uzodimma's presentations, that is in your column, left editors bemused, and even before that, that if the object of inviting him was to entrap him, it failed. So, did the guild do its job well in selecting Uzodimma as a keynote speaker?
Yes, I mean, I think that on the whole, I mean, he even if all he did was to turn the searchlight on the profession, on journalists, I think that was a good job, because given what the country is going through at this time, and as we also look forward to the next general election, this really is a time for introspection. So I think it was a good idea. He was not the only one who spoke. There were also other speakers who amplified the theme of this year's annual conference. He, of course, was the lead speaker. So there was actually plenty. It was not just all about Hope Uzodimma. There were also other speakers who made interventions as well. So I think it was, on the whole, I think the conference was well attended, was a successful one. But the only gap, as far as his presentation was concerned, being the keynote, was one that I thought we also needed to clarify, because, as I said, of course, he relied on a separate set of data, but the data from Reuters Institute showed that, contrary to the claim that he made in his presentation, that journalists in Nigeria were under a very low trust, enjoying very low level of trust. It turned out, to my surprise, I must say, that the contrary was the case.
I will come back to that. Yes. Uzodimma has had a lot of running with the Nigerian media, and I'll bring you an excerpt from Azu's column to give you a trail so you can fall back on that. And I quote, "But perhaps his most telling encounter with the press was in 2019, when, after coming in fourth place in the governorship election that year, the Supreme Court ruled that Emeka Ihedioha was not elected with the majority of the lawful votes, that 213,295 votes from 388 polling units in favor of Uzodimma had been unlawfully excluded. The press severely criticized the Supreme Court, and for a long time, the governor was the butt of jokes among journalists, who derided him as the eighth wonder of the Supreme Court." End of quote. I can barely hold back the fun of describing somebody as the eighth wonder of the Supreme Court. Okay, so let's go back to the object of his keynote, in which he claimed, based on the 2023 Edelman Trust Barometer, that about half of the population of Nigerians do not trust the media, which you already alluded to. That is a devastating body blow, I'm using your own words in your column, to the profession of journalism. How did you feel when he made that kind of...
Well, I've had my concerns, as I'm sure many professionals have, about the state of the profession and of practice. And I also have the honor of belonging to, well, as you have said, I'm a fellow of the Guild of Editors, but I'm also the organizing secretary of the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria. When concerns have been raised by at different quarters or in different circles about the standard and quality of professional practice, Nigerian publishers have been obliged to set up an ombudsman, which is like a self-regulatory mechanism for the profession, which is a step forward, after all the arguments about the propriety or otherwise of the Nigerian Press Council. I think what many people will agree is that those of us who are within the craft and who agree that there ought to be some minimum standards of conduct, agree that the coming of the ombudsman as a self-regulatory mechanism is a good thing for journalists in the country. At least those of us who are within the ambit of the mainstream ambit of professional practice, and that the ombudsman has started its work and is doing its work already, and I think that we need more engagement, between the ombudsman and the wider society at large, because you really cannot hold others accountable and then refuse to be accountable yourself. So I have had my concerns, especially because of all sorts of pressures There are internal, there are external pressures. But all professions or all crafts have their own pressures. You cannot use the pressures that you are faced with as excuse, which was also one of the points that Governor Uzodimma made in his presentation, that we cannot use inadequacies within the profession as excuse for unethical practices or for shabby delivery of what we're expected to do, which basically is to hold government accountable and also be ready to be held accountable ourselves. So yes, I think that we need to do more as main craftsmen, because that essentially is what distinguishes us from the others.
Yes, and your presentation also fundamentally challenged the fact that his report of Nigerian media not being trusted by Nigerians was countered by none other than Reuters. Would you like to throw more light on that?
Oh, yes. So Reuters also carried out a survey which found that a significantly higher population than of Nigerians trust journalists than had been, in the that had been contained
report.
in the Edelman report, which Governor Uzodimma quoted. And then Finland came in second, which I found rather interesting. And it was a survey, an online survey of 48 countries, covering about 100,000 respondents. And I think that is a significant sample. And anybody who knows Reuters will know that Reuters takes its job pretty seriously. Now, but that is not to say that we have to rest on our laurels. We cannot, because Reuters has said so, assume that there isn't. And there are some who even refuse to accept the Reuters report as authentic, and they have very good reasons. But if we do not, we cannot invent our own alternative facts just because the facts that have been presented we are not comfortable, or we don't find them convenient, But what I would say is that beyond the data, beyond the facts, we also need to look inwards and continue to look inwards and continue to find ways of making the craft more respectable, more trustworthy, more believable, and more accountable to the public that we serve.
And finally, there is this existential threat that challenges the integrity of the media, this agency of social media and citizen journalism. How can the industry sustain trust in the midst of the artificially generated content and the absence of gatekeeping? How can we continue to sustain?
Well, I don't know whether there are any gates left, that have not been taken down by the so-called barbarians. Well, that's just by the way. But you see, I do not think that there is a binary contest here between media and AI, or between us and them. I think that citizen journalism and the new forms of media enabled by technology ought to make our jobs as journalists easier, ought to take away the drudgery from our job and then help us focus more on journalism itself. So I do not think that these things, they have their downsides, all right. But my advice would be that we embrace them and do so with an open heart, and also do so understanding the limitations. They are not supposed to be a replacement for critical thinking, for ethical practices, and for sheer commitment and devotion to the profession that we love so, to the craft that we love so much. So what these new tools, what the modern tools and modern practices, including also citizens journalists, are supposed to do, they are supposed to help us deliver better quality journalism, remove the drudgery, and then face our core, core values, especially that of delivering meaning and context, and remaining ethical and objective to the facts that we report as journalists.
All right, we would love to go on and on and on, but we just have to draw the curtain at this point. For the full text of these and other articles, just visit our website at azuishekwene.com. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and leave your comments. And for our books, a series of them, just go to www.azu.media. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Julius. A pleasure. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Conversations with Azu Ishekwene.